Welcome officially to our webinar, Thrive and Survive, Why Long-Term Thinking Matters and How to Do It. It's organized by the Chair for Foresight, Innovation and Transformation, short FIT Chair at EDHEC Business School. My name is Kollenz and I'm responsible for the Department of Executive Education of the FIT Chair. Now, before we jump into the discussion, a little bit of housekeeping. Please use the chat, well, many of you have already done so, to pose any questions you have to one of our three panelists. We will have a Q&A session at the end and we'll have ample time to discuss them then. This webinar will be recorded and it's going to be available for replay once we've finished. Now, from our clients and executive education participants, we hear quite often how difficult it is to make time for long-term thinking and for preparing the long-term future of the companies. It seems that many of us are stuck in something like a constant crisis management since the pandemic. And that's why we've decided to focus today on the why and the how of long-term thinking in companies. And I'm extremely delighted to be joined by three experts who will share their hands-on experience and research with us about making companies think long-term. First, Esteban Martinez, Global Director of Research and Technology Transformation at Anheuser-Busch InBev. As many of you will have recognized, the largest brewer of the world. Thank you so much, Esteban, for being here with us. Then Hossein Kharazian, Corporate Strategy and Foresight Managers at SEMPERIT, which is a global manufacturer of rubber solutions, such as conveyor belts, hoses, gloves. So all the things that make the industry actually run, or many of those things come from SEMPERIT, an Austrian company, which is close to my heart because that's where I'm from originally as well. So thank you so much, Hossein, for sharing your insights with us. And last but not least, my dear colleague, Camelia Ram, an internationally renowned foresight strategist and top management consultant. Thank you, Cam, for being here with us. So, as I've mentioned before, from leaders, we hear that since the pandemic, they spend more and more time managing crises than thinking about the long-term future of their companies. Now, we would be interested to learn how you in the audience spent your time on an average workday. For this purpose, let's use the following due date impact matrix. If we could see that, please. Wonderful. So basically on the horizontal axis, we have the due date. So on the left-hand side, we would put tasks that are due now or this week, so super urgent tasks. On the right-hand side, we put topics that are due in the far future. Let's say a year from now, half a year from now, if you're a middle management position. On the vertical axis, we have the impact of the task. So on the top, we put the really high impact tasks, so the ones that have a high long-term impact on our company. On the bottom, we would put those tasks that have relatively little long-term impact on the company. Now that gets us to a matrix with four quadrants. The first quadrant is called crisis mode, which describes people who are spending most of the time managing extremely urgent but extremely impactful tasks. The second mode is what we call proactive leadership. So this describes tasks or people who spend most of the time working on tasks with high impact, which are, however, due in a quite distant future, so not extremely urgent. Then we've got a third quadrant called reactive mode, represents those who spend most of the time on urgent but very low impact tasks. And last but not least, there is a fourth quadrant, but I hope we are not going to feel that one a lot, which is called active disengagement. So low impact and due in the very long future. So that would be, for example, spending time surfing the internet for looking for holiday destinations for a holiday that you won't be able to take in more than a year from now. Now, question to you in the audience. Looking at an average workday, in which of those four quadrants do you spend most of your time in? Could we have the poll on that, please? So we have a bit of an answer from our audience. All right, I see the first questions coming in. Perfect. So where do you spend most of your time? Yeah, 30 more seconds to decide where will you spend most of your time of an average work day? 75 of you have already answered. What about the last 25% of the people in the audience? 20 seconds to go. Let's have a look. 85%, we're doing really well. Final countdown, so 3, 2, 1, and now we're going to see the results. Okay, so actually 35% and 39%, so that means more than 80%, well, almost 80% of us, 75% of us spent the time on the left-hand side, so on urgent stuff, and only half of them, even less than half of them, spend it in the crisis mode, so urgent and high impact tasks. This is actually quite representative of what we're seeing. What, however, research tells us is that highly impactful and successful leaders spend most of the time in proactive leadership. So they actually spend 80% of the time on high impact tasks, and they push their thinking and their company in towards the long term, working on long-term projects. Now, the question that gets us there is, well, if this is what happens, what are the reasons for leaders thinking more and more short term, so being more and more on the left-hand side? Cam, can you help us on that one, please?
Thanks, Karin. Many leaders focus on waves, the things they see on the surface, which are often events like supply chain disruption, hybrid working, cost of living crisis. And this puts them into managing immediate tasks, and it blinds them to the underlying tides or root causes of these events. These tides are the things that occur beneath the surface and actually influence the waves of those events. They include major shifts like sustainability, digital transformation, rising inequality, political tensions.
I see. So why is it problematic then if those leaders are constantly in crisis mode?
So it's natural, first of all, to focus on survival when you are facing ongoing disruption. And indeed, disruption is often perceived as those things on the surface. But disruption might actually indicate a fundamental shift in the context in which a business or indeed the industry operates. And this actually makes it critical to find entirely new opportunities, which is really difficult if you're in survival mode. It's very difficult to move into creative mode, that proactive leadership mode. And there's clear evidence that the context indeed is changing, as the lifespan of companies actually indicates to us. So, for example, we've seen from the 1980s to 2000, the average lifespan of companies fell from 42 years to 20 years. And it's expected that this is going to further shrink to just 12 years by 2027. What this actually tells us is that thriving businesses will have to be built on their ability to identify signals of change, translate them into long-term opportunities, and act with pace to turn them into reality.
I see. So basically the problem is if we don't think long-term, we're not around for the long term as a company, right? Now, from your research, what do you think leaders and companies can actually do to take advantage of those longer term opportunities that you've mentioned?
So our research highlights 3 interconnected observable practices that organizations can apply to think long-term. They are perceiving, prospecting, and probing. Perceiving enables an organization to detect changes. Here, the aim is to identify signals ahead of competitors to gain foresight advantage. Prospecting is about gaining innovation advantage. It's about making sense of detected changes, identifying tipping points, and investing once the time is right. And finally, probing, which enables an organization to take a new course of action, mainly through experimentation. And this provides transformation advantage.
Now, we've got the great luck to actually have 2 guest speakers who are working for companies who've recently shifted towards more long-term thinking. Esteban, what has motivated Anheuser-Busch InBev to spend more time thinking about the long-term future?
Well, first of all, hi, Karin. Thank you. Hi, Camelia. Thank you very much for having me here, and welcome everybody here. It's great to have you here. So the motivation for AB InBev. So for those that don't know us, we're essentially, again, the world's biggest brewery. We own 25% of the volume and about 33% of the total market value in the industry, right? So you would say, wow, big guys, monolith industry, and in many ways it's true. But the point is that we have grown, the company grew very much inorganically. We grew up through a lot of mergers and acquisitions for the last 20 odd years. And we got to a point in 2016 with the last big acquisition where we realized that this model was not fit for purpose anymore. There's really no other big industry out there that we could basically go out and take over. So this way of working, or this model that we created, was simply just not functional anymore for us, given already the amount of agglomeration that we had for the industry. And essentially the shareholders punished us big time. The shareholders really gave us a big punishment, and we lost a lot of share value because they also realized that this growth model was not happening anymore. And what they demanded from us was 2 things. We had to deleverage. We have some of the biggest corporate debt in the world. Don't worry, we'll pay for it. We know how to do it. And number 2, organic growth. This was the most important one, to be quite honest. The debt we manage, and they know that we can manage the debt, but the organic growth was something that was super important. If we can grow inorganically, we need to go for organic. And that really started making the company starting to rethink how we operated, how we actually delivered value for the organization. And it created this urgency inside the organization to really start looking at how we're going to do this. And yes, we tried to do a lot of short-term things, but also we needed to start figuring out what we wanted to be, or what kind of company we wanted to be, short, mid, and long-term. And essentially based on these, we received, let's say, the license to operate, or the license from the senior leadership to really start looking at this long-term planning. And I will stop here for a second. I'm not sure, Karin, if you have any questions for me here. Or...
No. Of course, I'd also be interested to hear from Hossein, what was the main reason for SEMPERIT to say, okay, let's actually make somebody responsible for corporate strategy and foresight, and take the time in the company to think about the long term.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, well, it's a little bit different than Esteban's journey in the sense that in SEMPERIT, historically, we have very mature processes for strategic planning and for midterm planning that normally touches a horizon of up to 5 years. And that being said, SEMPERIT, maybe a little bit of background, so like we're a 200-year-old, almost 200-year-old Austrian company. So I would say we got the go on survival, apparently. But you never judge like for the future planning or future success based on like the past success. Of course, SEMPERIT has managed to survive and thrive for almost 2 centuries, but we reached a point that we said, okay, maybe that's not enough. Maybe we need to look a little bit longer than that. And this is in our industry rather like we are, I would say, one of the pioneers, not the front line for sure, but one of the pioneers who are doing this, because we have traditional, let's say, conservative marketplace, market environment with our products, and very, let's say, long life product cycles. If you look at a conveyor belt or a piece of hose from 50 years ago, it pretty much looks as it looks today. So a lot of science and a lot of chemical knowledge has been into compounding or mixing or everything else that is in it. But the product itself is like, if you look at the smartphone from 6 months ago, it's different from what you see today. So that being said, with a lot of uncertainties and ambiguities that is surrounding not only our industry in the chemicals and in the rubber industry, but also at a broader grounds like energy crisis, be it supply chain disruptions and geopolitical issues, our board of directors at one point decided to have like better look at these things and to get prepared in advance. And that was the whole idea of like creating a corporate foresight independent unit within corporate development to look at that, not only the uncertainties, but also what about the future of rubber as a whole? What if in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, there are other materials that are more efficient and cheaper and more desirable by customers than rubber? What if rubber eliminates? And these kinds of questions kind of like pushed us to kind of have a better understanding of future, what comes to us in terms of mega trends, and future scenarios.
Yeah. So quite interesting to see two different reasons for the two companies thinking long term, both slightly external, because basically AB InBev, well, you couldn't continue growing the way you've grown in the past, and some shareholder pressure around that. And on the SEMPERIT side, more this question is like, oh, there is actually a possibility of a world without rubber, which is our main input material for the solutions that we provide. Now, I'd be interested to hear from you in the audience what gets or could get your companies to think more long term. Please put your answers in the chat so we get a bit of a variety, and ideas also for those who work in companies who are like, oh yeah, I'll never make them think in the long term. So ideas what could change the relative perceived importance of long-term thinking. I'll just go back to the chat to see your answers. Okay, so we've got companies who are rethinking their business models because of resource constraints. Yes. Disruptive competition. An example from North Bank, disrupted or potentially disrupted by fintech. Changing regulation, very interesting one. Sustainability and climate change, super interesting one. Changing customers, definitely. We also have that discussion with Anheuser-Busch InBev. Well, what kind of beer or what kind of drinks maybe are customers going to drink in 10 years? Disruptive demands, increasing awareness about mental health, about health generally. The need of embedding long-term challenges into the company strategy. That's an interesting one. We might want to discuss that a little bit. Okay, so very often external changes, which is pretty much what we also see as a main reason in research when we look at different companies there. Now, once you have the mandate for pushing the long-term thinking within AB InBev, Esteban, how do you implement that? What do you do?
Look for help.
And you got it?
We got it, and this is very true. Right? This is super important, right? So the first thing of all is that as many of our organizations, we were very short-term minded. The longer term that we saw, or the longest that we saw out, was 3 years. We were very focused, and we're still very focused, by the way, on meeting the quarters, meeting the year, meeting or the shareholder expectations, and that's never going to go away, by the way. It's not a case of now I'm going to think in long term, I cannot take care of my shareholders. That's not the case, right? So what we did is that me personally, I belong to the research and development group of the company. So let's say that we already have a little bit of a more longer term you, because we need to start developing technologies that normally we're talking about 3, 4, 5 years before they're actually implemented in place. So that was a good start for us. However, we felt, and we did an exercise the previous year where we tried to do this exercise with the resources, with some support, and we failed because we basically lacked the right mentality. We lacked the right mentality, and we also did not have the right framing or the right framework, right? So essentially what we did is that we realized our own weaknesses, and we actually came and looked for an external company to basically help us with foresighting, strategic foresighting, to really help us look at 10 years. Because when we start looking at 10-year planning, it's a very different animal than when we're talking about 3 years or 1 year. So we basically got in touch with Cam and René Hobeck. So basically they helped us basically set up the process, and together we built this process where we started looking at, of course, the potential world scenarios, things that you're discussing here, you know, what happens if this, what happens if that, you know. So we built these four very different world scenarios. And based on these world scenarios, we started looking into these world scenarios and try to understand what's the so what for the business, the so what for the consumer, the so what for the value chain. And then we started understanding what could be the potential death threats for the company or the potential opportunities for the company, right? And based on these, we started looking, and I realized that there were a lot of commonalities in some of these opportunities or challenging across the different scenarios. Once we identified these opportunities, we came up with the moonshots. So we said, look, you know, in the future, we believe that we should be looking at this, we should be looking at that. I cannot share too much with you, it's confidential, but I can give you one pointer, which is, for example, what's going to be the future of beverages in, let's say, the metaverse or the digital world. It's happening, everybody's talking about it. We're seeing a lot of billions of dollars being invested here. And the question to us is what's going to happen to the beverages industry there? How are we going to interact? So that's essentially the moonshot. And then what we're actually doing right now, and what actually I was just doing an hour ago, is how do we convert these moonshots into roadmaps? This is super important because we need to connect this 10-year plan. We need to connect the 10-year plan back to the 3-year plan and back to the 1-year plan. If we don't do this, we're going to lose everybody. I cannot go to my senior leadership and to my CEO and say, you know what, in 10 years, I'm going to give you an extra $1 billion of revenue, because he's going to kill me. He would like to have, or he needs to have a path to commercialization. That is, I start with my moonshot, 10 years, then I go 6 years, 3 years, and then I go to the present. And then I start developing knowledge, capabilities, and also the commercialization strategy together. And I need to show the size of the portfolio and the size of the potential future revenue or potential cost savings that I'm going to give to the organization. And this is how we keep this alive. And this is how we're going to basically make this happen. Otherwise, we're going to fail.
Yeah, so basically imagine the future. What is an opportunity or many opportunities, several opportunities for the company, and then think, okay, and how do we get there? And if we look at this entire picture, does that still make sense to go down that route? Thank you, Esteban. So that's super interesting. Now, Hossein, at SEMPERIT, in terms of the implementation of foresight, you've taken a slightly different route. Also because you're in the strategy function and not in the innovation function. Could you share with us how you've started the path towards long-term thinking? Absolutely.
Well, first of all, you don't think there is a lot of similarities between rubber and beer, but I saw something between what the journey that we've been on and what Esteban just mentioned. I guess for us, the difference was that we decided to do corporate foresight under the umbrella of corporate development, which is also where our strategic plannings are happening. So when we got the mandate from the board, or let's say we got them on board with that this is something that is needed and we want to do it, we kind of looked around at what are the possibilities and how to do it actually, because the main challenge for us was to put a structure to it, because foresight is tricky grounds. You don't want to put a lot of structure because it's counterproductive and against the whole idea, because you lose the flexibility, creativity, and innovation. But also no structure and no processes around it is also a no-go, especially in a corporate setting. So that's how I ended up with the 3P model that actually Cam just described, and took a course with Renee and Cam and learned more about this model and how basically the research around like having this the three processes of perceiving, prospecting, and probing. And that's exactly what Esteban mentioned in terms of like coming back from what is your desired future, how does it fit into like plausible possible futures, and hopefully kind of backcasting from, if this is the picture that I want to be in 10 years, where should I be in 5, where should I be in 3, where should I be in 1? And this is kind of like the path that we're going through at the moment. We are establishing our trend radar with the help of an external company, Trend One out of Hamburg, and they're helping us establishing the trend radar, and at the later stage, developing alternative future scenarios and narratives, developing scenario narratives of how alternative futures might look like for the business environment that we are in. And of course, as a next step, we are going to use it in our strategic planning next year, and at the same time, challenging our current innovation areas, what we're doing in terms of like being more innovative towards the market, and to take it from there, hopefully scaling it up to the next levels.
So what was so interesting for us when discussing with Hossein on the one hand side and Esteban on the other hand side is that we've got two examples here that use foresight in different areas, starting foresight in strategy, corporate development for SEMPERIT, and starting this initiative around let's think longer term in the global innovation department, which is quite typical. Basically, when you push for long-term thinking, it fits really well, be it when thinking about long-term strategy, or be it when thinking about, okay, where are our products, our technologies, what are they taking us in terms of innovation? So these are two quite representative examples of companies implementing foresight. Now, I would like to move on one step and ask you more about, well, what are the challenges that you've faced when running the moonshot exercise, for example, at Anheuser-Busch InBev, Esteban? How have you overcome these challenges?
Can you repeat the question again, just to be sure that I...
Yeah, what were the main, sorry, no worries. What were the main challenges that you faced when you started with these moonshot initiatives? You said that at the beginning, well, you tried once alone and it didn't work.
Yeah.
How did you overcome these challenges?
Linear thinking, not being able to step outside of the box, especially in, again, publicly owned company. We live quarter to quarter, so people are very focused on this, especially also when looking at problems. We're engineers here, so we love to see the problem quite well scoped to try to solve. And this managing uncertainty is something that we do not necessarily like so much. So we really need to start looking at this 10x thinking, being people comfortable with dealing with uncertainty, also giving them a wide space for them to really start breaking paradigms. You know, there's a lot of paradigms and a lot of elephants that we have in the room that we cannot touch for A or B or C reason. And it makes sense with the current setup of today, you know, the current legal, regulatory, whatever situation in which we are situated today. And inviting and first of all, training the people that were doing this, which by the way was a big team. We're talking about 36 people that got together to do this. This was not an Excel between 2 or 3 people. It was the whole team that sat down together to do this. We had the right training, the right facilitation to basically help us get rid of this linear thinking, right? So we just said, stop thinking about today. Stop thinking about how do you think the future may look according to your own biases. Let's figure out how the future might evolve irrespectively of what your bias is going to be, and let's create these 4 worlds that are going to be sufficiently different from each other, still plausible. It's a world that if I tell it to you, you're going to say, actually, I think I can see this happening. And that was really one of the key points. How do we break with the present? Break with the present, break with the today, break with what is today happening, push everything forward, put the people in that particular world, say, you're that person, you're living there, what are your problems? And then people start thinking, oh my God, actually, yeah, if this happens and this happens, this happens, I'm going to be in real trouble, or the business is going to be in trouble. And then people started saying, okay, now they started to understand how this 10x thinking and this foresighting and this 10-year plan works. Because
okay. Yeah, sorry, thank you. No. Because you were talking quite a bit about skills, and that's where I would like to hear from Cam again. From your research, what are those skills needed to actually transform companies into successful explorers and exploiters? So exploiting the short term to make profits in the short term, but also explore the future to be sure that we create the resources and capabilities we need to be successful in the future.
Yeah, so building on what Esteban said, it's about indeed thinking outside the box, right? So those skills are all about how do you reframe a problem, understand root causes, how do you engage others to challenge existing beliefs, how do you understand patterns from multiple data points and make sense of contradictions or conflicting information. And then, but then to translate that now into, so there's thinking outside the box, and then there's acting outside the box, right? So there's this need to not just spot opportunities through disruptive change, but to work at pace to turn those opportunities into reality. And that's where we move into the world of innovation and transformation. So innovation requires us now to make choices with incomplete information, testing multiple hypotheses, learning from failure, course correcting quickly. And transformation there's a big piece there around alignment. There are multiple skills, obviously, but the main bit is around how do you continuously foster open dialogue, engaging stakeholders, especially when views diverge, when there are those short-term crises and short-term disruptions to address. How do you stay that course? How do you keep people staying true to that clear purpose, working across indeed multiple partners to access those capabilities that the organization needs but doesn't have today?
So basically what you're saying is not only about the foresight capabilities, but in order to make it happen, you need to have some innovation capabilities, but also transformation capabilities or skills within the leadership. So the FIT that we're finding in the name of our chair. Now, Hossein, you've told us you've implemented foresight at SEMPERIT. What skills have you used for that, and how did you build those skills in yourself and in the small group that you've been working with for the last few months?
It's a very good question. I think I'm going to answer with telling you a story. And the story is me and my boss sitting in a room deciding that, okay, we want to do foresight. We got the mandate from the board. Let's do it. And he was like, okay, how do you want to do it? I was like, it's a corporate foresight. We are corporate development. Let's do it corporate way, and let's just do it ourselves, and it should be fine. And his answer was like, let's learn more about this, and let's go out there and see what is the good examples, like the success stories. How did others do it, not to reinvent the wheel from scratch. And that's when basically I took the course with Renee and Cam, Strategic Foresight at EDHEC, and my way of thinking towards foresight, I would say, revolutionized. It's just a completely different perspective, and that I realized how important it is to engage people and to kind of like make a team, just like what Esteban mentioned about like having, well, our team of foresight is not that big, but still we all are like 10 to 12 people from various like industrial segments or business units of ours. We have R&D engineers, we have mid-level managers, and we have a very good combination. There are finance people and so on. So 10 to 12 people from different skill sets, and then try to kind of like get them out of their comfort zones, put them somewhere. We normally do it like offsite in another location, like in a hotel conference room or something, and just no laptops, no phones, just focus and be unbiased. And that's, I think, the most challenging part, how to like get someone who is in rubber, and rubber is sticky, right? So once you touch it, you can let go of it. Someone with that kind of like strong, sometimes personal feelings about rubber. Imagine a world where there is no rubber. Are you kidding me? What world would be? So that I think would be for us is the main challenge, and we are still in the process of implementing foresight, and we're still all learning. But in this journey, I would say the course I took at the FIT Chair really helped me, giving me a different perspective and how to engage people, and how to deal with people who's just like the quadrants that you mentioned in the beginning. They're always on crisis mode, and I have a plant on fire, or I don't know, I have to deliver my quarterly result. Are you talking about 10 years from now? And imagine a world where rubber doesn't exist. No, sorry, got time. Don't got time for that. So to kind of like combine those energies and kind of make the ends meet, for me has been always the challenge.
I hear what you say. This is what we often also experience in our executive education courses when our participants say, "Oh, I don't have time to think about that." Well, first you need the skills, and you need the time, and then you need to translate back. Well, what does it mean today, as Esteban has also pointed out when he was talking about the moonshots, which are not abstract ideas for, oh, this is going to be what we do in 10 years ago, but they need to translate in, okay, what does it mean today, and what does it mean today in terms of what we're doing, but also in terms of our revenues and our profitability. Now, of course, it's great to hear, Hossein, that the Open Strategic Foresight Executive course from the FIT Chair has helped you to implement foresight at SEMPERIT. Cam, could you maybe please quickly share the different ways we support leaders and companies to become fit for the future?
Sure. So I'll start with our standard course, so the Strategic Foresight Executive Certificate course that Hossein just mentioned. So that's 5-week long course, 35 hours. So we ask about that roughly one day a week. And this focuses on how to build foresight advantage, where it's about indeed exposing yourself to and working with others to test out frameworks and techniques on how you make sense of disruptive change and how to identify opportunities for your business. So there are two main sides to this, right? Identifying signals of change, making sense of them, but then looking at what does it mean for us in terms of the actions that we might need to take. And each week there is a 90-minute live class with faculty, so myself or Renee, as well as a couple of others who've recently joined us. And there's an option as well for going deeper. So if on the back of the course you want to explore how you might implement this with your company, there's an option for an additional 5 hours of one-to-one coaching, or indeed group coaching if a group of you have joined the course from the same company, to look at how you actually make this happen and what are the first steps that you might take for your organization. In addition to this, we support customized learning experiences where we tailor support to you to build the combination of foresight, innovation, and transformation advantage that works for where you are and where you want to be. With foresight, the topics are focused on methodologies and techniques to challenge assumptions and identify those pockets of value ahead of competition. On the innovation side, the topics that we focus on are about how do you identify breakthrough innovations? How do you develop future-proof business models and manage that portfolio? How do you begin to map out indeed those roadmaps that help you to move also now from the future, from that 10-year future to the world of today? And transformation topics are about how do you now really move to execution? How do you lead through disruptive change? How do you identify the right partners that can help you to build the capabilities that you ultimately need, but you don't necessarily have in-house, so you can continue to move at pace?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cam. Well, now it's time to look at the many questions that I've already see flying by in the chat. Please don't hesitate to post them again because I might have overlooked them. Questions to Hossein, to Esteban, to Cam, to myself, in case I can be of help. Let's go into the Q&A. So Louise asks, how do you identify size of the prize if business models in the future do not yet exist? A very good question, and I know Esteban has been thinking about that question. I'm not saying we've got the answer, right? But do you have a first guess?
Yeah, for sure. So we don't. You're absolutely right. We don't have the answer to this, but this is basically going to be my next challenge, right? Because we're building the roadmaps. We're going to consolidate. We're going to understand what we're going to do step by step, all the way to 10 years. But of course, I need to also show the value and the value that I'm going to give to the business. What I'm thinking of is essentially we have the steep categories that are basically part of how we started working our scenarios. And essentially what happens is that, the steep categories will be looked at. And this is why we need the foresight to understand, are they going up? Are they going down? Regulatory, economics, and everything else. But at the end of the day, what's going to happen is that it will have an impact on the demographics. We have consumers. In our case, our consumers are basically over legal drinking age people that have X amount of disposable income that they can actually afford to buy our products, right? So if we know that we're seeing that there's a particular signal that is showing us that it's not moving in the right direction, i.e., we're going to have an issue with demographics in the future. Maybe there's going to be natality rates or economic rates, where we're going to see maybe people dropping off or maybe going back to poverty line or actually skipping out of poverty line. Then we can start figuring out the most important thing, which is what we call the total addressable market, right? So, and this is all based on demographics and how much money these people have to actually buy our products, right? Simple as that. So once we understand what this total addressable market is, then we have to make an estimation of what is our right to win. How is this product or this solution going to allow us to capture this particular part of the total addressable market? And here we have to make assumptions based on what our current market share is in a specific geography, how much people are going to be retiring, how many LDs are going to come in, and then I can make an estimation of how much market share I can actually capture as a business. And of course, I will have a good idea of what the potential revenue line is going to be for that particular product based on what I'm currently selling today. The key element is that I'm not going to tell you that I'm going to create a portfolio that is $1.35678 billion. I can tell you that this portfolio is going to be single-digit millions, double-digit millions, 100 millions, billions, or tens of billions. Right? I cannot get more granular than that, but at least I can at least understand, look, this is going to be a big deal or it's going to be a small deal. And then I can start figuring it out.
Yeah, sorry, Esteban. Yeah, because I see lots of super interesting questions coming in. And I think what is important and what Esteban has also shown is you have to develop that logic, funnel logic as we do traditionally. And over time, you can verify each of those assumptions and get better. And of course, at the end, it's going to be a guesstimate, right? But if you agree on a way of thinking, then you can get better in guessing. Now, I've got a really interesting question from Anne-Charlotte from Cursia. So which kind of external support do you get? I'll ask Hossein, because you've worked with a few different companies there, right? Traditional consultancy, other type.
Yeah, well, in our experience, we didn't work with the big guys. So there are a lot of foresight consultants out there. And I think choosing the right partner is very important. And it really depends on what kind of industry you're in and how much know-how already exists in your company. So if you're at the position that you have people who have futures thinking background, foresighters, or innovation managers who have a clear understanding of foresight or taking some courses to increase their knowledge, you probably won't need really an external support. But the advantage of having an external support is to give like extra structure and extra, like put better processes in place that can work for years to come. Like I said, the company that we chose for us was Trend One. It's a company out of Germany, and they are innovation accelerator. They do everything about innovation and foresight and stuff. But then again, if you have the knowledge in your company to establish a trend radar in the right way, that is, and develop alternative scenarios, narratives of the future by yourselves, you probably don't need to employ McKinsey or Bain to do that for you, right?
Thank you for that insight, Hossein. And I see time is fleeting when we have good discussions. So what we will do is we'll come back with answers to the questions that we couldn't answer in the public Q&A. So I've got the time to thank you so much, Esteban and Hossein and Cam, for sharing your insights with our audience. Well, thank you to the team that you haven't seen. So Jacob and Lupe, who made sure that everything has been working in the back. And thank you, our dear audience, for being such a great audience with many interesting questions and answers to our questions. Please join us to one of our next events. Tomorrow, I'm invited to a Financial Times live conference where I will share our insights about the changing skill sets required after the pandemic. Please don't hesitate to get more information or register for the next Strategic Foresight Executive course. You can also find information about projects we are currently running at the FIT Chair and register for our newsletter to make sure that you get all the information in the future about the activities that we are doing. With that, I would like to ask you to not hesitate to contact us if you would like to know how we could help you to become fitter and fit at your company to prepare this world for a positive and prosperous future. I wish you a great afternoon. Thank you for being part of this webinar.